It's Sports Bizarre.
Gee, there's a lot to like in this story.
Keeps getting more ridiculous as it goes on.
The hunt for the weirdest.
What are you talking about?
Are you serious?
What? So many questions. Okay, I'm going to have to stop you here.
Strangest.
Unflattering, but essentially accurate.
I'm quite exhausted.
It's going to get stranger and stranger.
Most unbelievable.
If you wrote this as a movie, people wouldn't believe it.
Stories to ever occur.
An epic tale of woe, joy, nutty
The
behaviour.
fact that it's not more well known is just the strangest thing.
In the world of sport.
This is going to get juicy here, isn't it? We should open a window or something.
Sports Bizarre.
How many testicles did he have?
8. Found running naked down a major street in Chicago. This, of course, is the last time organised crime and boxing have crossed over.
Got up in a press conference. We're here to announce we've swapped our wives.
What is going on?
It's time for the leaders of the hunt.
Not household names for me, but
Surely a red flag.
It's Titus O'Reilly and Mick Malloy.
hello everyone and welcome to the latest edition of Sports Bizarre. Titus O'Reilly, of course, in the chair.
Mr. Malloy.
Bringing it to the table. Before we get into it, thank you so much, everyone, for all the feedback and advice we've been given. Less slouching. I've heard that a bit from the YouTube crowd.
Lose some weight.
Lose some weight.
Gee, some real
Yeah.
real personal feedback.
That's right. And that's just from my mother. So, anyway, we really...
You didn't think she'd listen, but she did.
I didn't. I thought podcasting was beyond her. But here we are, once again, raking over some of the more absurd stories from the world of sport. I'm enjoying just sitting here while you bring it. What have you got? What's on the table today?
Well, we have said, and I'm happy to say again, if people have ideas of stories they want us to do,
Please.
we are very keen. I've already got quite a lot of suggestions,
Yeah.
and some of them I had already on my list, but some of them are ones I was vaguely aware of, and I've gone down those rabbit holes. So for people that know,
Okay.
this one that we're going to do today is one that we've been asked to do already quite a lot. And what we're talking about today is that most bloodthirsty of sports, Olympic figure skating.
All right. Yeah. Torval and Dean, those two, they were
That's right,
bad
they
eggs.
So the one we're doing today, which a lot of people know, is the Nancy Kerrigan and Tonya Harding story. Which,
Okay.
So this is one people I think will know, but I don't think they'll know all the details.
So this isn't that unusual.
It's not an obscure one at all.
But it's an epic tale.
It's an epic tale, and I think
Shakespearean.
Absolutely Shakespearean. Probably more bloody than even some of the But the thing about this that I think and why I was keen to do it is when everyone asked, I thought, I really do want to do this for two reasons. One, I think people know the vague story fairly well, but there's some bits about the actual people that carried out what happened, which we'll get into, that it just, to me, I mean, it's like a Coen Brothers movie. It's like these criminals that barely can function. I mean, if the Coen Brothers had written this, you'd just believe it was theirs. Like, that's how much. Secondly, this one has had a bit of a resurgence. So we're going back to 1994, but there was the I, Tonya movie with Margaret Robbie, and there's been a bit of a push in a lot of the media as I researched this lately to sort of portray Tonya Harding as the victim in this incident, and I just kind of find that if you actually go through this with a fine-tooth comb like we will, I find that harder to sustain, and I thought, that's something we want to do. So for people that don't know, Nancy Kerrigan and Tonya Harding were these two American figure skaters, and both had been teammates in 1992 on the US women's team. So they knew each other incredibly well.
Had they grown up skating together?
Yeah, they'd always known each other. It wasn't like they were necessarily close, but it's not a massive world, figure skating.
You're bound to run into each other at some stage
you're going
on the circuit.
Yeah, either off or on the
Did you
ice.
ever skate yourself?
I've ice skated and not figure skated. Like, I'm the one that goes. You'd
be in the heavyweight division.
Well,
Do they have
weight divisions?
weight divisions for
I'd
figure
be the
skating?
guy going around with just using one leg to push, and ice skating to me is an attempt not to fall over.
That's a constant
basically-
battle with gravity.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Can I say, so I did some ice skating in Frankston. I don't know if you're listening from anywhere in the world. It's a fairly agricultural part of the world. And the ice skating rink, here was what you had to do. And you were instructed when you got your skates. They said, if you fall over, form a fist because someone is going to try and skate over your fingers.
They're going to actively
will go.
Because it's a rough area. Especially
area?
when it's gentrifying slightly. But for people that don't know, it was a slightly rough area when you moved out. It got slightly gentrified.
But I think skating with Tonya Harding, you probably should have formed a fist as well. Do you think?
I think. So 1992 they'd been teammates.
Yep.
Then the 1994 Winter Olympics were approaching. Now there was only 2 years in between these two Winter Olympics because it used to be the same year as the Olympics.
Yep.
The Summer Olympics and the Winter Olympics would get overshadowed. So they switched it. So it was 2 years after the Summer Olympics. Okay. So they were sort of off and on this 4-year cycle. So they had this very short turnaround between the two. And they were both always very different skaters in the public mind. So
can I put it to you? Nancy Kerrigan was like America's little sweetheart. Yeah. Is that fair? Like a Disney princess in a way.
This was the perception of them.
The
both.
perception.
So and Tonya.
But I'm going to say I don't mean to be rude, but a bit trailer parky.
Yeah, well, that was definitely the view was that Nancy Kerrigan was this American princess, upper class. She was dressed by Vera Wang, the American designer.
I'm not sure you can say Wang on this podcast, by the way.
But Vera Wang, who was this high-level designer, did her outfits. So, that gave her this sense of, she was really very highfalutin. And then you had Tonya, who was this... So, Kerrigan is a skater, and I know you've always studied figure skating closely. Kerrigan was seen as this American princess, but also her style of skating was incredibly graceful. So that was how she did well.
Yeah.
Harding was this sort of wrong side of the track, shorter, stockier, but incredibly powerful skater. So she wasn't as graceful, but she could perform tricks.
She could bang it out.
Yeah, she could perform tricks that just no one else could do. So she had this amazing ability to do things, and that's how she got by. But known as a prickly character, So while Vera Wang was designing, Nancy Kerrigan's, sponsors and designers didn't want to work with Tonya Harding because she was seen as quite rough around the edges and not someone you could sort of do business with.
She could have skated with a poncho.
Well, she used to make her own stuff. Like she had the glue gun out doing the
bedazzler. Because it's a specific style, isn't it? I always love watching the figure skaters, not in a leery way, but you go, they're all... It's kind of a bit fantastical.
There's an element of it's glamour, but it's sort of it is Disney princess glamour.
There's a lot of twirling and a hint of underpants.
So they're incredibly different. Now the interesting thing here is Nancy Kerrigan. The image of her and the reality were very different. So Harding gets portrayed as this hard luck woman that's had this terrible upbringing and really hard, and there's a lot of truth in that. But Kerrigan was from a very working class family. Her dad would drive hours to take her to practice. She worked insanely hard and had not had everything thrown at her feet the way she's portrayed. So there's sort of this thing that people have to get in their head that just because Nancy Kerrigan appeared to be this Disney princess, American princess who'd had everything handed to her, she wasn't. Yeah. She'd worked so hard to get where she'd gotten, which made this moment that happened, it was days out from the American US figure skating championships where they decide who's going to the Olympics. So huge pressure. And it was days out. It was the 6th of January 1994, and Nancy Kerrigan just finished training at the Cobo Arena in Detroit when a man approached her, and she was back off the ice talking to a reporter, and a man approached her and hit her with a metal object just above her knee, which is just
say it in such a matter-of-fact way. But
I know. So you remember when this happened, right? What were your memories
totally.
of it?
I remember not giving two hoots about ice skating and hearing this story and going, did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Someone's been kneecapped on the ice.
Yeah.
It's just this world's colliding. I've never seen this before.
If you weren't alive at the time or you're too young to remember this, it is impossible to convey how big a story this was at the time, isn't it? It was everyone went from not knowing who Nancy Kerrigan or Tonya Harding were and not caring two hoots about figure skating in the Winter Olympics particularly to every single person had an opinion on it.
It was unbelievable.
Every media outlet was covering it number one. You would have been doing it on radio, I imagine, at the
I
time.
just remember thinking it was like a mafia-style hit. Because you didn't know, for the first
We
thing
didn't
you
know
go,
who'd done it,
who'd
what
done
had
what,
happened,
but
yeah.
you're going, someone's been kneecapped on the
And it was
ice.
and it
It's
was
not a
filmed.
random attack.
Yeah, it was filmed. So the camera caught the aftermath. It didn't catch the guy hitting it, but so obviously
So say it again. This is after training?
after training, Kerrigan comes off the ice. She's chatting to a journalist. I don't think it's an official interview, but it was just they were chatting. And a man approaches her and hits her with this metal rod. We'll get into what it was. Once, and then runs off. And she is then caught by camera.
Lucky she wasn't speaking to a journalist. Oh, hang on, she was.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't.
That's a sneaky attack off Broadway.
Yeah, that's right. But we'll unpick this and you'll see why this was such a... But the reason it also blew up as a story is a camera catches within seconds of the guy leaving. There were all camera and media around. It happened in the back area. A camera caught the aftermath of Kerrigan lying on the ground, clutching her knee and screaming out, why me? So, really harrowing footage that just was easy for the media to pick up and go, wow, this has happened, right? So it wasn't like it became a TV story, not just a print story, because they had footage of the outcome. And every news channel was soon, and this is at the time, it's probably the internet really being really big, but CNN was huge at the time. The 24 news channels were picking up. So it was on a loop. You couldn't turn on a TV without this being seen. So this happens, and immediately afterwards, it becomes such a big story, the FBI launched an investigation. So it's not like the local police chief is
Right.
the FBI aboard in straight away. This is before 9/11, so the FBI didn't have much to do.
Didn't have much to do.
Yeah, so
it's a
they
quiet
were
day at the office.
They were like, this is it. So
It's an ice skater's just been hitting the kneecap with a bar.
dropped it.
Scramble all helicopters.
Yeah, they never, in the movies about the FBI, it's always chasing serial killers or
yeah.
terrorists. No one joins the FBI going, I want to protect ice skaters
I
from
need to lift the lid on the seedy world of figure skating.
Yeah, so when this happens is Kerrigan, in the days that follow, it turns out Kerrigan, the news is much better than expected. The blow had landed a bit above her knee and it had caused extensive bruising, but hadn't broken any bones. So it hadn't worked, basically, what they'd attempted to do. And there was even good chance she was going to be ready for the Olympics. Tonya Harding, at the meantime, and at the time, no one knew who had done this attack or why.
Suspicion didn't just fall.
Not
go to
immediately,
anyone,
because it's amazing to think that this was happening, that someone had done this to help another skater. This wasn't the instant thing. People thought at first, was this a jealous ex? Was it a mad fan?
Someone with too much spare time on their hands.
Someone who just like kneecapping? Like a mafia guy who's sort of
starting small,
just keeping the eye in
before he goes like a mob boss. I'm just going to start at the bottom. What's an easy get? I know, a female figure skater.
Yeah, let's do an easy hit.
Sneak up and kneecap her.
So this also has happened. So Harding easily secures her place on the US Olympic team. So she skates. Kerrigan's not skating. So Harding's in right away. She won gold. Harding wins gold at the national championship. Kerrigan, though, despite being unable to compete, the other skaters all agree to give her a spot on the Olympic team. So despite her this happening, they're both on the Olympic team. So that was good news for Kerrigan, obviously.
Yeah,
so that's where it was. But obviously, the whodunit of who had actually been behind this and the motive was still out there, and this has been speculated about.
So does the FBI, because I've watched a few of their specials, have they got the big, the serial killer board out with the, the mafia family trees with all ice skaters and profiling with Torval. What about Torval?
That's right.
Torval
Every ice skater.
Yeah,
None of you are innocent. You're innocent. You're guilty until proven innocent. So the FBI...
Imagine a lineup. Imagine a police lineup of just figure skaters.
And they're all posing.
They're all in bodysuits. The men are in bodysuits. The women are in those.
They're like, pick someone from the lineup. Well, the one in the sequence, you're going to have to be a lot more specific than that.
I'm going to ask you all to skate to Bolero. And What did they skate to? What was Nancy Kerrigan's go-to?
I'm not sure, actually. I'd have to look into that.
But you had one job, which was to research this topic, and you can't tell me what Nancy Kerrigan skated to.
It's surprising in my research of this how little ice skating I watched, isn't it? You know, but most of the stories
Ooga
we tell.
chaka, ooga. What are the best songs to ice skate to? Bolero. So that
Bolero's the big one.
that
A lot
was-
of Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky.
Yeah,
He'd be happy.
The Russian composers do.
Ah, they bring it.
They got that melancholy.
They bring it on the ice.
Stay tuned for our classical music podcast.
The banjo. Has everyone ever?
I don't think a banjo. Yeah, that's probably the instrument. That and the bagpipes, probably the two instruments least linked to ice skating.
Ice skating to bagpipes.
Yeah, no, I think
Mouth organ.
Mouth organ just suits any moment though. That's just often if it's a bit of a romantic evening, get out the mouth organ. Now,
Someone work that out. Write into us. Tell us what Nancy Kerrigan used to skate to.
I'm sure we can find this out. So there's good news though in the days following from the FBI. They have a bit of a breakthrough. A woman who, refusing to identify herself, phoned the Detroit deputy police chief, a guy by the name of Benny Napoleon. Isn't that a cracking name?
You can't make that up.
Benny Napoleon.
Yeah.
And she'd seen him on the TV, so naturally she'd rung up. And she claimed to have heard a tape. She says, I've heard a tape of 4 men planning the attack on Kerrigan, which is pretty amazing that someone would make.
Why would you tape it?
Well, we'll get into this, but
Hang on. If you're planning something, the idea is not to leave any trace
That's
that
right.
you've done this.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to tape this for what purpose?
and then someone else has heard it. So not only are you taping it, but a random
You're
woman has
broadcasting
heard
it.
it and rings the FBI. She says, I've heard this tape. It's 4 men planning the attack on Nancy Kerrigan. She's an anonymous tip. And our good friend Benny Napoleon, which if that's not a TV series about a cop named Benny Napoleon soon, American TV is not doing its job. He makes a list of the names because she said these are the men talking in the tape. So
Okay.
he gets told there's a tape of them planning, and he gets told the name.
Can I ask, do you reckon it's a 4-man job? Do you think?
You'll realise it took at least the fact that even 4 managed it.
Fire away.
So, what became very interesting for the FBI is this is a fascinating group of 4 men. Absolutely fascinating. The first on the list was an unemployed man named Jeff Galooly, who was
Jeff Galooly?
who was Tonya Harding's ex-husband.
Oh, my God.
Although they seem to be back together, so it was a bit uncertain about they were divorced, but it was a bit uncertain whether they were still living together and together again.
Titus, I'm no Einstein, but I'm starting to join the dots on this one. Galooly.
Yeah, so suddenly, the investigation discovered that it's possible one of the men who's a suspect is Tonya Harding's ex-husband and possibly still with her. So therefore it starts to become clear to them, was this done to knock out a competitor? Like, they've got a motive all of a sudden.
Unfortunately, someone taped it.
Yeah,
so
as well.
We've got this.
So they've got. So then another man was a guy called Sean Eckhart, and he's a long-term friend of Galooly's, and he was the head of World Bodyguard Services, a business that was so successful, Mick.
Yes.
He ran it from his parents' house, where he lived. So
oh my God!
This was his only client of Sean Eckhart, was Harding. And so he's Tonya Harding's bodyguard.
Again, it's hard to trace this back to Harding.
So suddenly the FBI, within minutes, within days of the attack, have got suspects including Tonya Harding's ex-husband, possible current partner, and her bodyguard. Now, Harding, though, Sean Eckhart was so hopeless as even a bodyguard that Tonya sort of did that because he was a mate of Jeff, said,
Right.
yeah, you're my bodyguard. But it's not like...
What do you need a bodyguard?
Until this happened to Nancy Kerrigan, no one needed it.
Had there previously been
No.
any incident of violence, danger?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, you'd suspect there'd been some stalking at some point of people, but not that. So there was. We've already got involved Jeff Galooly and Sean Eckhart.
Galooly's a great name.
It's a great name, And then Next was another friend of Gillies, a guy called Derek Smith, who was also unemployed. So we're not talking, when I say Coen Brothers movie, this is not, this slick, sophisticated operation. He was unemployed, but he had a plan to open a paramilitary survival school in the Arizona desert. So that was his thing. I love people have plans, but they're not doing anything towards it. But that's just his idea. Like, so he's unemployed, but he goes,
he's got
his ideas, man. Yeah, he likes to think. Now, the last person on this entire list of the 4 men talking in the tape, which the FBI don't have the tape, they've just been told about the tape that this woman had heard it, was Derek Smith, our paramilitary survival school hopeful. His nephew, a guy called Shane Stant, who was a high school dropout, and that was basically it. That's all he'd ever done.
He was the brains of the operation, it sounds like.
He had an interest in bodybuilding, but beyond that, he'd managed to fail at everything he'd ever done. So that's okay. So that's our crew. We've got Galuli.
We've assembled the A-team.
We've got Sean Eckhart, who's running a bodyguard service that doesn't really exist. We've got a Derek Smith, who's running a paramilitary survival school that wants to. And then we've got Shane Stant, who's a high school dropout and goes to the gym.
It's like SEAL Team 6. This is as good as it gets.
These are tier 1 operators, as they would say in the business. So this the FBI say they've got this promising group of suspects that they now know the names of the 4 men. They've got a strong link to Tonya Harding. So they start to suspect, obviously, Tonya Harding pretty hard at this point. So they've got all the details they need. And so they start to look at it. The FBI begin as they start to look into this, that these are not the most sophisticated criminals.
I don't think you need the FBI. I think I could do this. Anyone who's got half a brain could probably unscramble all the clues at this stage.
You'd think so. So it turns out, and from the further investigating, that the plan had come to fruition simply enough. So Galuli was complaining to Sean Eckhart, the bodyguard, about the possibility that Harding could not make the Olympics, that Nancy Kerrigan could take her spot. And this is something Galuli was very concerned about because Harding was his avenue to money. Like, she has a few sponsorships. Yeah. She was a big star in the Olympics movement.
Gotcha.
Figures they say.
A meal ticket. Yeah. But was it a genuine concern? Was it either or with Harding?
It was looking it was just very likely. Harding, Kerrigan were the 2 best. So with Harding, there was a chance both of them could make it, but with Kerrigan out, Harding was basically assured. Gotcha. Like, there was no one else that could challenge her. So that was the concern. And Galuli was very worried about this because this was his avenue to money. And if Harding missed the Olympics, all the sponsorships, all the deals go out the window, and Galuli would have to do something drastic like get a job. So it was something he was not that keen on. Eckhart was very understanding of this as Harding's his only client for his world bodybuilding.
So he's on board.
World bodyguarding. So he's on board. And he also thought, hey, if we take out Nancy Kerrigan, then other ice skaters will think there's someone out there attacking figure skaters. I need a bodyguard, and his booming business would result.
Brilliant.
So he thought,
so this will drum up business.
Yeah, by orchestrating this attack, we could actually.
I'll own the figure skating
lucrative figure skating bodyguard market, which is possibly worth billions a year.
This is hilarious.
So he's really thought that through too, and he thought it could help him realize his dream of not living with his parents,
moving out of the basement.
So he's on board straight away. He says, we should think about that. If we could take out the main competitor, this would help both of us a lot, and it would help Tonya. So they're all into it. Derek Smith, who's our paramilitary desert friend, he just happens to ring Eckhart not long after this discussion about something else entirely differently. They're just chatting. And Eckhart, being the professional bodyguard he is, can't help but tell Derek Smith all about it. We want to do this, we've got to do that. And he told Smith all about the plan that we want to take out Tonya's main thing. Smith said, I don't think I'd be the right person for this. I'm pretty busy with my pretend Arizona desert paramilitary camp. He says,
I got big plans.
He says, I have the perfect person for the job, though. I'm the perfect person.
Okay.
Now, That is the loosest use of the word perfect in the history of time. Because the person he had in mind was his nephew, Shane Stant. High school dropout.
He's available.
He's free.
I can get him.
Yeah, I can get him. And it's a bit like, it's a bit like saying we need the Sistine Chapel ceiling painted and you going, I've got the perfect person. That's someone who's never held a paintbrush before.
Right.
Like, it's that far out. So Smith then rings his nephew, Stant, and says, there's this very loose plan. We want to take out Tonya Harding's. So suddenly there's 4 people involved, right? Already it's like gone from just this rough conversation. And he says, would you be interested in being the one that does it? And Stant says, I am interested. I'm currently very free. And he's offered $6,800 to do the job.
What?
And he accepts.
To do the actual...
To do the hit. Well, they hadn't worked out exactly what they were going to do at this point to take her out.
And how they arrived at that sum?
I think that's probably
done
what they had on them. GoFundMe.
They knocked over a vending machine.
That's right. So they go, okay, well, so they suddenly... this plan has gone from a rough whinging about something to people talk, 4 people suddenly are involved in it, and they've actually worked out a price, and they've got the hitman, the guy to do it.
All right.
Now, they don't have a lot of a plan at this point, but it just shows you how terrible things and bad things happen because it's multiple layers of stupidity coming together all at once to create something like spectacularly stupid. They're greater than the sum of their individual parts. So then they begin to plan, or the rough idea is stop Nancy Kerrigan from being able to compete against Tonya Harding.
That's the goal.
So then they're like, brainstorming, if I'm using that term in the loosest.
How they do it? Well, what were the options?
Yeah,
Did they have other options?
Yeah, so the first thing is they start to say, well, we've got to stop her participating in the national championships. Eckhart says, the bodyguard, we need to do something drastic. So he floated the idea of running Kerrigan off the road.
I was going to say that, or hit and run, or like run her over.
So he suggests that we run her off the road. That's shot down by the others because...
what? Too stupid? Too obvious? What? We might get caught?
Yeah. Like, Stant recalls later, he actually said, and this is a quote from Stant, there was initial talk of cutting her Achilles tendon, which would obviously cripple her. I didn't think it was necessary. I wasn't willing to do that. So Stant says, I'm not willing to cut her Achilles tendon.
Because that's like permanent. That's
That's
Wolf
crippling
Creek stuff.
Yeah, that's really full on.
Yeah.
And so Stant's got some morals. He draws the line.
He said, hang on.
Yeah.
Here, I'm in.
But
for 6,800, I'm not cutting a tendon.
Tell him he's dreaming. Achilles heel. That's Achilles cutting Achilles. That's 10K. So anyway, he says no to that. Both Galuli and Stant told
Cutting a tendon. I mean, that would end for an ice skater. That's
it.
That's
right.
game over.
That's game over.
Hit the showers. You're cooked.
So he says he's not willing to do that. But then both Galuli and Stant both recall...
How are they going to do that, by the way? Like, they sneak up on her while she's sleeping, or how do you...
These guys...
She's wearing ice skates. Like, how do you cut...
Well, you got to remember, these guys...
They have ideas.
They have ideas, but they don't necessarily. The next level is where they run into troubles. Like
cutting a tendon.
I know. This is
brilliant.
Galuli and Stamp both have told the FBI since, as part of their later on when they were being interviewed, that they told them that Eckhart had said to them both, "Wouldn't it be easier to just kill her?" And talked about where he could position a sniper with a rifle, and that suggestion was ignored.
Is this the paramilitary guy?
No, this is the bodyguard guy.
So I would have thought the paramilitary guy would be all in on the sniper.
Yeah, that's right. No, the Eckhart.
Where's the sniper? Like while she's skating? Like,
Are
you taking her out from the top stand?
Yeah, it's like the that scene in the movie Ronin where they shoot the figure skater. He's like, so Eckhart. We're starting to get a sense. He's the bodybuilder guy. Lives with.
Like you twirl her. She does a big jump and then just comes down and there's a red patch on the ice.
Do you reckon that's a harder shot for a sniper? Someone moving around on skates and spinning? I reckon that's
Tell her to stop. Play something slower. Can you?
Play something.
She's moving. Slower. She's twirling.
It's very hard. No, the thing you got to get this, you're getting the sense with Eckhart that this is, so he's the one that
he's the voice of reason.
He's the bodyguard one. He's the one that lives with his parents, but he has delusions of grandeur that he's this hard man. Now, he's not the one doing the hit. He's this guy that thinks he's like an operator. He thinks he's a serious, like he knows security and everything. So he's like, yeah, let's shoot her. And like, none of these guys
I just
have
want to
ever
remind
done
everyone
this.
we're talking about
Figure skating, yeah. But none of them have killed someone before or even done any of this. So the idea that they're talking about this, it's not like they're
Do they think they're actually going to
ex-military
do it
or-
at this stage, or is it just
I think there's
few
an
blokes getting
element
together?
here where it is becoming a bit, like it's guys talking nonsense and all trying to one up each other in how tough they are.
Yeah.
With no one really at first, I think, thinking we're actually going to carry this out. But events tend to, none of them want to back down either and say,
They've backed
I'm
themselves
out.
into it.
Yeah, so eventually they all agree that the best way to do it is to cripple their landing leg. So if skaters have a leg they land on, they do that. Stant then goes to a store
Of
called...
course.
And this
is the first smart thing these guys have done, is they've targeted the landing leg. Because you're cooked.
Yeah.
That's it. No one's getting
That's
off
right.
the ground.
And to reject some of the more intense options that Eckart's been throwing
They
out.
have dialed it down a bit.
A little.
From cutting her Achilles or killing her or running her off the road.
Yeah, the professionalism doesn't stop though there, Vic.
Okay.
So Stant then, they all agree we're going to cripple their landing leg. That's what we're going to do. Stant then goes to a store.
Listen to yourself.
Why can't you? This is a very run-of-the-mill story, Vic.
Right.
Stant then goes to a store called Spy Headquarters.
Of course.
And buys a black 21-inch retractable tactical baton for $58.56.
Okay.
Keeps the receipt.
That keeps the receipt
Well,
and
it might be
tapes
tax-
it.
it might be-
Tapes the whole thing.
It's tax deductible. You don't want to... I mean, so this is the thing. He's gone and bought this. So it's a retractable metal police baton, basically, right? Like
I'm guessing there'd be CCTV footage
Yeah.
at a place called, what is it? Spies
Spy
R Us?
Headquarters. You'd think Spy Headquarters would have CCTV. So they've settled on a plan. They've bought the
Baton.
equipment. They're agreed on it all. The only remaining problem they had then at this point is
Why would you have to buy a baton from a spy shop? Like, when I think of spy equipment, I go, infrared goggles or a listening device.
No, I know.
Not a bar. What's so spy about a bar that's got a...
I don't know. Like it's one you can move down so you can hide it and stuff, and then you flick it out, and then you can hit
Those
people.
retractables.
Yeah, retractable one. So that's what he's got. So now the only problem here is they don't know where Kerrigan is. Right? So it's pre-internet
whose
days
job's
and
that?
social media.
Who's in charge of,
Well, this is where
stakeout?
This is where it gets... Yeah, that's right. This is where it gets a bit contentious because the different... in the investigation that follows, different players reclaim different things. But Galuli claims that Tonya Harding assisted with finding Kerrigan. He says she knew all about it. She was involved up to her
I'm going
neck.
to stop you there. So this is the first time you've mentioned this. She is an accessory before the fact.
According to
She's in on it.
According to Galuli, she was. She denies it at the time that she had any prior knowledge, let alone assisting with the whole thing. He says, but we'll get into this. There's lots of information around this.
I trust Galuli on this one.
Yeah. The thing is, there's no one you really instantly. There's not a witness you go. I think that they're. I'll take their word for it. But Galuli claims that Harding assisted with finding where Kerrigan was training and where she was at the time, because these people tend to move around. They might be performing somewhere or competing or training. So he says Harding found out. Now, according to Galuli's FBI statement, Harding calls a journalist called Vera Morano and asks for Kerrigan's home address. And she said she had a bet about where Kerrigan trained and that she also needed her to sign a poster. So that's what Harding, Galuli claims Harding did to find out where she was.
Right.
Morano, the journalist, was later interviewed by the FBI, and she confirmed this call did happen.
Right.
So we do have Harding confirmed finding out where Kerrigan's training, even though she denies anything.
Right.
She said she did manage to get... This is the journalist. Morano says she did get the details of where Kerrigan trained at the Tony Kent Arena on Cape Cod and passed this on to Harding by leaving the information on her answering machine. So The FBI have this confirmed that Harding did make the call and
Wow.
did find out. Right, but Harding still denies that she was helping. That just claims, "Oh, I wasn't trying to get her to sign a poster." So Smith and Stant then drive down to training at Cape Cod and find out that Kerrigan's moved. So they've told she's in Detroit. So they drive back and forth between these two places about 5 times in a comedy of errors, getting lost.
Gotcha.
And can't track Kerrigan down. So they're all up
Just
for the
kind
hit.
of curb crawling ice skating rinks.
That's right. They can't find her. Eventually, Stant does arrive in Detroit and works out she is in Detroit. And so he's in the right spot. Kerrigan's in Detroit. He's in Detroit. So Shane
I
Stant...
would have thought ice skating would be huge in Detroit. It's a motor town. It's a hard town. It's 8 Mile. It's
I know,
rap.
but it's very... Ice hockey is huge there.
Okay.
It's cold. So, there's quite big there. So... Stant,
It's cold.
It's very cold. Originally the technology now is you can have ice rinks in Arizona. You've got ice hockey teams in the South and in LA, but for a long time, they tended to be where it was pretty
Detroit.
cold.
They would
And
make
Detroit was right
Zambonis,
up
wouldn't
there.
they? They would make the Zamboni.
Yeah, the
wouldn't.
Zambonis there.
That'd be
They
good
could have run a road
Zamboni.
with a Zamboni. I mean, how they didn't come up with that for a
That would have
plan?
been a really slow guy coming from behind.
He's slowly coming up to me.
No. She goes under the Zamboni
So Stant arrives in
on her landing leg.
Trying to run over someone in a Zamboni would be...
That's a good scene in a movie.
So Stant arrives in Detroit. He's finally lined up. He's in the right spot. She's in the right spot. And he stays at a Super 8 motel, cleverly using his real name. He also uses his own credit card to rent a VHS player and some X-rated movies.
Jesus Christ.
So he's leaving the whole trail. He's there to
focused.
do-
He's focused.
He's there to
He's
do
not-
a hit. He books in with his own... So when people go, why were you in Detroit? He can't even say, I wasn't in Detroit. He's left record that he stayed there and they can trace his credit card because he rents a VHS player and
and an
and
X-rated
pornos.
movie and pornos.
So once again, not. So the next day, Stant, after watching his movies all night, he makes his way to Cobo Arena for surveillance because he's a pro.
Okay, yes.
He goes and
He's casing the joint,
He's casing the joint. Exactly.
leaving nothing to chance.
Nothing to chance. This is a slick operation. He finds security at the arena is non-existent because this is just training. So
Well, can I just say, why would there be security at an ice skating rink? I mean, come on.
I know. So he gets there. There's no security. He spends 45 minutes wandering around. He heads down to the ice level, and there's no crowd there or anything. It's just purely training. And he also goes into this corridor leading to the skaters' locker room, which is where he eventually will do the hit. And no one says a thing to him. No one notices him, cares, whatever.
Go about your business.
Yeah. He also finds an exit with plexiglass doors and decides, this is my escape route. So I'll do the hit here and I'll run through there. And he told Smith, who's the Arizona paramilitary fantasist, well, he's in Detroit there. He says he's going to drive the getaway car. So he says,
Which
you
should
wait
be a
out.
Zamboni. I'm just saying.
So he says, you wait outside these doors with the car tomorrow when we do the hit. So they've cased the joint. They've mapped it out. He knows where to go. It all works.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So the next day, Stant arrives in time for Kerrigan's practice. And being the absolute professional he is, he forgets what she looks like. Doesn't recognise her. He asks someone who's there, could you point out Nancy Kerrigan to me? So minutes before he's about to do this,
He's identified himself as looking for Nancy Kerrigan. Wow.
So, he's a real winner. So so the guy goes, that's her on the ice there. And he goes, oh, thank you very much.
How much is he being paid? $6,800.
You pay peanuts.
You think you would, if you got the job, the one thing most important is to be able to identify the intended victim.
Yeah.
Except turning up and going,
But to ask someone as well.
Wow.
To go, excuse me.
It's not a Tinder date. It's not like wear a scarf so I know.
Yeah, exactly. So he doesn't recognise us as spectators. Kerrigan finishes her skate. He watches her finish. She finishes. He follows her down the corridor to the locker room, and Kerrigan is locker room. Sorry, but she's on the corridor on the way to the locker room.
Okay.
Kerrigan's chatting to a newspaper reporter.
Yep.
And this takes us back to where we started. This was his chance. He approaches. He walks between the reporter and Kerrigan. He pulls out the retractable baton. He strikes Kerrigan's knee. She goes down screaming. And despite being the perfect guy for the job, he's missed her knee. Hence her ability to still commit. He also just hit her once because when she starts screaming, he panics and runs.
What, he wasn't expecting her to...
Yeah, so he doesn't hit her a few times to make sure of it. He hits her above the knee on the fleshy part of her leg, not on doesn't break her kneecap or anything like that. So, and the minute she starts screaming, he just sprints. So he hits her once and runs, totally panicked.
Wow.
So panicked that he gets to his exit point, that he's the plexiglass doors that he's identified the day before.
Earlier.
Yeah. And unlike the day before, they're locked with a chain. Right? He can't go back because there's a Kerrigan screaming in pain and everyone's rushing. So he gets through the plexiglass doors by ramming his head into them several times and crawling through the hole he made. So here he is. Comes across he's botched the job already.
Yeah.
Gets these, headbutts his way through a plexiglass door, crawls through the home. He gets through the hole. Outside, he briefly lay on the footpath recovering.
Where's the getaway car? Where's the paramilitary
And then he
guy?
picks himself up and throws the baton under a parked car and runs.
Okay.
Naturally, he runs in the wrong direction. Away from
towards the police station.
Away from where the Smith is waiting in the getaway car.
Oh my God.
So he runs away. So Smith has to go and drive around and find him and get him.
Has to find him because when you're driving the getaway vehicle, it's not great to have to stop and ask for directions or.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you seen a guy?
So Shane Stant is bleeding from the headbutting through the plexiglass and climbing through. He's dazed, and he's run away from the getaway car. You don't want to run away from the getaway car. So it's going well. But luckily Smith finds him and they get him. He gets in the car and the job is done. And the amazing thing about this, after all we've just spoken about, is that it got done. The idea that these guys even got this far is almost as astounding as the fact they did it. The fact they carried it off, not well and not perfectly, but you could have seen this just not happening at all, right? But they've actually done it.
I'm still getting my head around the idea that a getaway car has to chase the guy who's supposed to get into the getaway car. That would never have happened ever. Galooly.
So
where's Galooly while all this is happening?
Well, Galuli's just not. Right. Galuli's not there, and Eckhart's not there. So Galooly, Harding's partner, and Eckhart, the bodyguard.
He'll be somewhere public, so he's got a.
No, I don't think they're even that smart. They're just back home, right? So the job's done.
Watching pornos back at the hotel.
They're creating paper trails. Well, they are creating. So interesting.
All right. So where are we?
So let's go forward to. So that takes us up to the attack. So by the 11th of January, not even a week after the attack, so it's about 5 days, I think. Galuli's hauled in because of this tip-off of the tape. He's hauled in before the FBI, and he confesses everything straight away. He says,
"What do you mean?"
He says, "We did it."
What, under cross-examination? Under interrogation?
Yeah. Well, they just call him. Well, they just call him in and say, "We've had the tip off. We can place Stant in."
And he just coughs it up.
And he just coughs it up. I mean, they're not hardened. These are not hardened criminals or they're confronted with the FBI. It's the biggest story in the world. So they've obviously it's gotten pretty big, and they've suddenly got the FBI in front of them.
How long did it take the FBI to track him down?
Well, about 5 days, because once they get the tip off of the call, they then go and do some investigation, like finding the credit card details of where they've all been and all that, and suddenly they're away, right? These guys have not. They know the guy Shane Stant is in Detroit because of his porno habits.
He's got a big egg on his head, on his forehead.
And so and then they get the photo of him because they know he's a suspect because this woman's tipped it off. And then they go to the arena. Everyone who was at the arena at the time go,
Yeah,
have you
that's
seen this guy? He goes, yeah, that was the guy that was asking for who Nancy Kerrigan was 2 minutes before she got attacked. So it's like, and then they can also cross his credit card details and find out he stayed in Detroit at this, so
Incredible.
using his own name. So it's not like, this was a hard case to crack once they had the tip off, right?
Yeah.
So charges.
I'm worried about Nancy Kerrigan, by the way, and we haven't heard how she's
well,
going, but you get there.
So charges are laid against all four men, right? The FBI, Gululi's confessed. Part of the reason that the FBI tracked down them so quickly, on top of all the things we've talked about, is Eckhart, the World Bodyguard Services guy, and who claims to be a professional security expert. He couldn't stop bragging to everyone that he had planned the attack. He just told everyone, right?
He taped it and sent it out.
So even before the actual attack took place, he had a friend listen to an audio tape of the four men discussing the plan, telling his friend that he'd made the recording in case he needed to blackmail the other three down the track.
Oh, he's a thinker.
So the woman that had tipped off has obviously heard that tape. That's how the tape got made. So he made it to blackmail people, but then he plays it to everyone to show he's the mastermind behind.
This is astonishing.
Yeah.
This is a masterpiece of stupidity.
Oh, it's just, if it's the what not to do if you want to commit any crime. Not that we're trying to educate people to commit crimes, but these are the do nots.
That's right.
So as soon as the FBI started interviewing Gululi, he begins to immediately implicate Tonya Harding and say...
Is he trying to get a plea deal or something? Is he rolling
I
over?
think he's just rolling over and agreeing to... he's just willing to... He knows he's cooked. He knows he's done. So he figures I'll cooperate and hopefully, yes, get a lower. But he also says from the very start, he says Harding was involved in the attack. Her only reservations had been about... He says the only thing Harding wasn't all in on is she had reservations about Eckhart being able to organise such a plan, which you'd have to say is a fair enough reservation, right? Harding, confronted by the FBI based on Gululi's testimony, denies all accusations that she'd had any prior knowledge of the attack. And she issued a statement saying, "Despite my mistakes and rough edges, I've done nothing to violate the standards of excellence and sportsmanship that are expected in an Olympic athlete." Now, do you think she wrote that?
No, I'm just saying she hasn't sat at home and finally crafted that.
Someone's done that. So while this is all happening, so you've got this case of
Does the public know all
the public
this?
know these four men have been arrested, obviously
They know
because
the
of their
connection to
close
Harding.
connection to Harding. The
Suspicion
suspicion has fallen on her,
Yeah.
and she's denying it publicly. And the FBI is saying, he's saying you did. She's saying, no, I didn't. She's issuing a statement to say,
Has she been
they're
interviewed by
lying.
the FBI?
She's been interviewed by the FBI and all that sort of stuff. So meanwhile, while this is all going on, still the number one story on every news channel is the number one story around the world.
Yeah.
Right? It's the biggest story. Meanwhile, in Portland, a woman by the name of Kathy Peterson had discovered that someone had dumped their trash in the dumpster behind her restaurant called the Dockside Saloon. And this happens all the time, she said. She had a big dumpster at the back. People would, drop their rubbish
hate that.
in. Yeah, hated it. There's an etiquette to that, It's
Just don't do it.
So this drove her mad. And so she'd seen someone dumped a heap of trash. So she opened the bag to see if she could identify who'd done it, because she was going to go yell at them.
That's right. Well done.
Instead, she found a check stub from the US Figure Skating Association made out to Tonya Harding and an envelope containing handwritten notes about where Nancy Kerrigan practiced and when. And Peterson had heard all about the attack, obviously the number one story in the world at the time, and who Tonya Harding was. So she calls the FBI, and the FBI grabbed this stuff and later proved that the handwriting is Tonya Harding. So as well as the call to that journalist of where does Nancy Kerrigan train, the FBI now have handwritten notes.
How's it ended up in Portland?
They'd driven it up there, obviously, to dump it, right? So they're not far from
Dump it
there.
in a dump master with a cranky woman who's going, right.
Yeah, they obviously didn't think of a shredder. Now, while this is all going on, the US Olympic Committee had decided to bar Harding from competing in the Olympics because they said to Tonya, you can't go. This is ridiculous.
Not happening.
Kerrigan's going. We're deeply suspicious of you. We can't prove it. Harding sues them for $25 million,
Okay.
saying, you don't have any proof. I haven't been charged. Gululi is a jealous ex-husband who has obviously done this for whatever his reasons, but it's nothing to do with me. How dare you?
Yeah.
It's false. You're falsely stopping me. We're going to... The committee, the Olympics committee, US Olympics committee, have to back down because even though they don't believe Harding's denials, they're like...
They don't have a lazy 25 mil.
Yeah, they don't have a lazy 25 mil, but they have no clear evidence that she had any prior knowledge of the attack. And the FBI say we're still building the case, so we can't charge her yet or anything. So it's not going to work out for your timing. So Harding, despite all this, is allowed to compete at the Olympics.
You haven't told me what's happening with Nancy Kerrigan.
We'll get there.
Now.
So in Lillehammer, the games are getting underway. So we're finally, because this is all happening in the shadow of the Olympics about to start. Yeah, Lillehammer. So the games are getting underway. Kerrigan and Harding had to share the ice during the American team's practice session.
Frosty?
You're very frosty.
Standing at the different ends?
No, listen to this. The two skaters come together for the first time since the attack. It resulted in a media frenzy. 700 journalists show up to practice from all over the world. So, just to watch. No one would be... There'd be about 5 journalists normally. 700 are there. So over the top was the coverage that Sports Illustrated, in their article, calculated the closest the two skaters came together while on the ice together. And it was 31 inches or 78.74 centimetres.
That's close enough to whack someone
again
in the...
Now, Kerrigan's getting to Kerrigan. She's made a miraculous recovery just to even get there. You got to admire.
Not she got a bruise? Has she got any
She's
damage?
bruised, but immediately
little bandage or something.
Yeah, she's got bandage under there and everything. But immediately
like
after
a bandage that's been bedazzled.
That's right.
It sparkles.
She's actually just wearing a metal ring around to stop her getting hit again. No, but immediately after the attack, Kerrigan's commits herself to this exhaustive, and this is where this gets lost. This part of the story. It's all about Tonya Harding and how hard a childhood she'd had or whatever. But people don't realise Kerrigan has gone through this incredibly traumatic being attacked. And she then immediately...
Yeah, she's been mugged.
Yeah, mugged. And seriously. And scared of who did it and why it happened and all this. Because at the time, she didn't know all the details that we know now. She, immediately after the attack, instead of she could have very easily gone into herself or whatever. She commits to an exhaustive rehabilitation regime and gets back on the ice.
This is a montage scene in the movie.
This is the montage.
Rocky
right.
style.
Yeah, it is. It is the Rocky
back,
style. So she is literally, and this bit of the story never gets told. She had been, couldn't walk. And then, not long after, a few weeks later, she's out skating during practice for the Olympics, about to perform at the Olympics.
Has she stuck a landing yet?
Yeah, she's skating well.
Wow. A landing leg?
They say, she seems to skate well during practice is what the media say about this one where she does it. In a sign, though, and this is where I love Nancy Kerrigan, in a sign she didn't believe Harding's protests of innocence. In the training session where they're both competing, and how's this for mind games? In front of these 700 journalists and all the world's media with it being filmed, Kerrigan wears the same outfit she was wearing when she was attacked.
With blood on it?
Yeah, she literally does. She wears the exact same one.
And a caliper.
And she was asked about it afterwards, and she told the media, humour is good, it's empowering.
Wow.
So that's why I love her. How hard-ass is that to go, you know what, I'm not scared of you. I'm going to let everyone know that I think you're just absolutely lying. So finally, on the night of the actual competition for the actual Olympics, so this Harding skates...
I can't believe they're skating together on the same team.
Yeah,
this is incredible. Can I ask you, were they friends? What was their relationship before the whole thing started?
Everything I've read seems to suggest that they got along fine, but they weren't kindred spirits. Yeah. Harding is in everyone's description a difficult cut person.
Okay.
Sponsors didn't want to work with her. It's just she was so damn good, but the authorities didn't really like her. She was just she was a brat, in a way. She was high maintenance, difficult,
figure skater.
Yeah, always had a chip on her shoulder and all this. Where Kerrigan was just, from everyone just said, was just a really nice person, not highfalutin, very easygoing, easy to work with, worked hard. She was just the eye.
Okay.
So on the night of the actual competition, the Olympics are on. Harding skates her program, and obviously the intensity of what's been going on and the scrutiny is starting to get to her because halfway through her program, she has to stop, and she shows the judges that the laces on one of her skates are broken. So the judges allow her to redo her routine, but she's obviously rattled.
And what's the song?
And she... Now,
Who let the dogs out?
Who let the dogs out?
What is it? What's she skating to?
Heaven's in the backseat of my car. The judge is allowed to redo her routine, but she performs nowhere near her usual level. She's off. She finishes eighth.
Wow.
So Kerrigan, though, does the opposite. She skates one of the best programs of her life. Couldn't walk a few weeks before, gone through all this trauma, fought back, all the scrutiny, all the media. She's a number one person media. She comes back and skates one of the best programs of her life, and just an amazing response. And the crowd responds with a standing ovation. They throw flowers on the ice, and she skates off, and everyone says she's in full contention for the gold medal. The fairy tale ends slightly because she's upended by a 16-year-old Ukrainian, Oksana Bayol, who beats Kerrigan by 1/10 of a point.
Well, she's got a barring coming. She's
exactly.
going to get kneecapped within an inch of her life.
But the point I just wanted to make is, despite only getting silver, like and this is the bit that gets lost, is what Kerrigan did, like the mental and physical strength, and to perform like that under all that pressure, the trauma, the focus, everything, is something that always just doesn't get mentioned. People remember Tonya Harding. They don't remember Nancy Kerrigan, and it should be one of the great triumphal stories, and it's just never mentioned. So that brings us to the end of the Olympics. A fortnight after the Olympics, Harding pleads guilty to conspiring to hinder prosecution. So her story is, after denying any knowledge for months of before or after the attack, like to get to the Olympics, she said, I didn't know it happened. I don't know what happened after. I didn't know about it until everyone else knew about it.
Yep.
She admits that she did know the attack. She still denied that she didn't know before the attack, but she said after the attack she did know that it had happened, that these guys she knew had done it, and they'd done it for her. And she didn't come forward and tell the police about what she knew. And so she's sentenced to 3 years probation and fined $160,000. So that's what happens to Harding. Galuli and Eckert both plead guilty to racketeering to avoid heavier charges. Galuli is given 2 years in prison, and Eckert sentenced to 18 months. Smith and Stamp both plead guilty to conspiracy to commit second-degree assault and sentenced to 18 months in prison. So their cunning plan has come undone.
Wow.
So what's amazing about this is, ever since this, Nancy Kerrigan gets lost in it, and Tonya Harding gets portrayed as she had a tough upbringing and poor person, even though we know she lied about knowing after the attack and lied to FBI, didn't come forward to the FBI, hindered the prosecution just to be able to still go to the Olympics, even though she knew who had
Is
done
this
it.
a position she still holds today?
Well, so that was her long-held position. And Tonya goes straight into this as she's a bit of a victim. But you just the more you learn about this, you go, well, hang on. She had the chance to come forward and do the right thing and say, I found out these guys did the attack, but she didn't do that. And she denied all knowledge whatsoever just so she could go to the Olympics.
Yep.
Then her long-held position for decades after it was that, yes, she knew after the attack that they'd done it and didn't come forward and been punished for that. But her long position, she knew nothing about the attack at all. She'd always stuck forward that before the attack, she'd had no knowledge whatsoever. Even though we know her handwriting had been found with Nancy Kerrigan's whereabouts, and even though we knew the call to the journalist, she still denied any knowledge, which was always and Galuli saying, and she did. That she did. She knew everything about that. So you have to take all of these claims with a grain of salt. But he and, they had a strange relationship. There was accusations of violence between them, which he always denied. There was all sorts of, no one really knows the full thing there. But Galuli's FBA statement, just to give him some credit, is very accurate with everyone else's statement of not just the three other blokes, but the other, well, not only with what the accomplice said, but even like what the statement Vera Morano, the journalist, said about Harding ringing and all that. So it seemed once he was busted, he was fairly truthful. He knew it was done. So this was all the thing. Then there's the fact that in an ABC News 2-hour special that aired in 2018, so not that years ago, it's called The Truth and Lies, the Tonya Harding story, Harding completely changes her story. So this is like almost 20 years later. For the first time, she admits she knew something was up before the attack. So when grilled, she goes, well, I did know something was up. So
This isn't a bombshell.
This isn't a bombshell,
is
right?
it?
But it just
it's
showed,
good to hear her say it.
Yeah. Harding told ABC News she suspected something was up about a month or two before the attack. She said, I did, however, overhear them talking about stuff, where they said, well, maybe we should take somebody out so we can make sure she gets on the team. And she said, I remember telling them, I go, what the hell are you talking about? I can skate. But the thing that is interesting about that to me is she never has admitted to this, and then she just completely, because she's doing this interview and she says, oh, okay, yeah, I did know. I did have insight. And then it makes me wonder, really.
Well, she wanted the doco needed a.
It needed a yeah. So
story.
14 years she's denied it, and then suddenly she does it. So now you sort of don't know what it is. But that's the thing for me is after all this time, she just completely changes the perspective. And so when you look at it, you've got Tonya, who's painted as sort of this victim these days.
Yeah.
But she totally, I think, knew beforehand. Or she even admits now she knew a bit before, but I suspect deeply that I don't believe her. Then you've got, she did cover up and lie to the FBI, or not and come forward to the FBI rather.
Yes.
And then, you got all these things, and she's the one held up as this victim. Then you got Nancy Kerrigan coming back from a kneeing.
What happened to Nancy Kerrigan?
Well, she lives a pretty quiet life, and, I think this was enough publicity for a lifetime. And, she's done a bit of media occasionally around ice skating stuff, but that's basically, and meanwhile, the rest of them have all basically returned to absolute obscurity.
They should get the gang back together for one more hit.
One last job?
I don't know, maybe. Once you've done ice skating, where do you go from there?
Is there lawn bowls? Is there, what's the most genteel sport? Chess.
And here we go. Let's go to the flower show.
So that's the Nancy Kerrigan, Tonya Harding story, which really, in my mind, should be the Nancy Kerrigan story. But
absolutely, but
the Tonya
she's
Harding.
The one. I want to see that movie. I'm going to go for the role of Galooly, who I believe is the only moral compass. He's the guy who only one who acknowledged the error of his ways on tape.
Yeah, and never record something when you're planning a criminal conspiracy.
Did Tonya Harding go on to have a successful career in porn?
She dipped in and out. I wouldn't call it successful. I think she did one or two just to
something for Stant to watch when he's in the hotel room, waiting for his next gig.
Yeah, he was thrilled. I think she just did it. She did that because she's obviously got notoriety, but no one wants to give her money or anything. So, so a morality tale.
I'm exhausted. I'm going to go home. Next time, can you come fully researched? I need to know what song Nancy Kerrigan, and who was the girl who beat her for the gold? The Ukrainian 16-year-old.
You've got to get that right.
Well, I'd like to know what she was dancing to.
I've got to know everything. I really feel like I've let you down with the lack of musical knowledge.
Well, I just would have thought that's the first thing. Galooly would have been on it.
I'll tell you what, I was a bit thrown by the headbutting the plexiglass.
Oh, man. He's running away from a getaway car. I think that's with a getaway car chasing you and beeping. Beep, beep, behind you.
Are you my Uber?
Yeah. Man, there's so many great bits to that story.
Oh, yeah, it's the best.
Thank you for listening to Sports Bazaar with Titus O'Reilly and Mick Malloy. We're on all the socials. Follow us there. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, it helps us out. And if you've got an idea for a story you'd like us to do or got some feedback, send an email to us. We're even on the electronic mail. It's info@sportsbazaar.com.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone next week.
We can't wait. If anyone knows those songs, send them in, please.